Hi everyone, this is Julianne Victoria of Through the Peacock's Eyes. Welcome to my channel. So in this vlog, I'm going to discuss, I guess, what am I? That's the best way I could sum up the question. So I've had someone ask, what is my definition of being a spiritualist and a healer? But I have people ask, all the time, am I a Buddhist? Am I a Christian? What do I identify as? And that's a hard answer to give. I do believe that all religions, all spiritual paths, have something to offer anyone and everyone on their personal journeys for their spiritual growth. And some people choose to follow one religion, and that's great. Some people choose to follow no religion. Everyone's different in their paths, and that's kind of part of the basis of when I started up my Through the Peacock's Eyes blog. It's to be able to connect to guide, to help inspire other people from any background, and even non-spiritual backgrounds, people who are looking for personal growth, but they don't necessarily view it or believe in it from a spiritual perspective. And that's a big part of what being a spiritual life coach or a spiritual counselor is. And I know on my website, I usually say spiritual life coach. I used to be a registered counselor when I lived in the state of Washington. And I'm looking at a different certification that isn't limited by where I live. I have looked into becoming a spiritual minister, but that's not quite what I want to do. I don't want a congregation, so I don't feel like that's totally necessary. But I haven't totally written that off. But I think I'll be getting a different type of spiritual counseling certification pretty soon. Okay. But what am I? What am I? So first, to answer the question, I think it came from Lucy. Thank you, Lucy. She asked, what is my definition of being a spiritualist? Because it came up in a vlog a few months ago. Now, there are the spiritualists who are part of the Spiritualist church, and that's a specific religious path or group. And the Spiritualist church, they do a lot of mediumship, connecting to dead relatives and things like that. That's a big part of what they do. So that's not what I mean if I say I'm a spiritualist. Spiritualist, though, however, if you just break down the word, is someone who is interested in, involved in spiritual things. And so that's what I mean by it. And when I look at different religions, if you take out the political stuff of current times or of times that texts were written, take out the political stuff, take out the culture-specific things, then you get sort of the foundation of the religion. You get you could say the ethical and moral, you could say laws, practices. And when you strip away, again, all the kind of man-made stuff, the politics, the specific culture, some of that had to do with the climate you were living, and so you needed to do things a certain way. When you strip all that away and you get to that foundational, that groundwork of each religion, they're all teaching us how to live good lives, how to connect to God, how to find the divine within ourselves. And so that's how, when I look at religions, and I've studied many religions, how I see them. I take away, I call it the political stuff, the cultural stuff. If you choose to follow that, that's fine. That is your path. And I feel everyone's path is different. Some people really feel strongly they need to be part of a spiritual community, a religious community, and that's important for their path. Other people are looking for personal growth, but they don't see it from a religious or a spiritual perspective. And that's okay too. So kind of the atheist view. But we're all on a journey in some way. And so, if I were to label myself a spiritualist, it's to help people on their paths, no matter what their backgrounds. So I do feel, it's helpful for me to continue to study, learn about, connect with different religious and spiritual practices. And personally, I work with the ones that work personally for me. Okay. I hope that answers that question. Lucy also asked, what is my definition of being a healer? So a healer is someone who helps someone else facilitate the healing process. Using the word healer can be I guess, a bit, not challenging, but a lot of people expect, if you say you're a healer, that you're going to fix them all on, like, on your own, that they don't have to do anything and they can just lie there, you know, if you're doing, like, you know, hands-on massage therapy, structural integration work, or, you know, you're doing Reiki or whatever. They kind of, you know, if some people have that expectation, oh, you're a healer, then fix me, I will do nothing. But that's not how it works. A healer facilitates the healing process. So a healer may, through whatever they do, and I practice the many modalities. I have a video on my healing experience and education or something like that. I'll look for it and link it on screen at the end. But a healer, no matter what the modality, and I do feel like this should apply to modern medicine as well, to doctors, to nurses, that you're there to help the healing process. Now, there's some things we can do, whether it's Reiki, working with the energy, channeling healing energy, or a surgeon, that yes, the healer, their actions, whatever it is, depending on their modality or modalities, will trigger some sort of change. Hopefully in a beneficial way, sometimes not, but hopefully will trigger a change in a beneficial way. So the patient, the client, will notice something, be like, oh, they fixed me. But that's just the start. Where healing really takes place is after that, and what the individual does to continue their healing process. So as a healer, so right now I'm only doing my distance Reiki and shamanic healing. I'm not doing any in-person client work. You know, most of you know I have a small baby, so she takes up most of my time, and so I don't have an office space where I see clients and stuff and do that. So I just do the distance work for the healing right now, which I absolutely love. I do my work, but I also suggest, I give advice on what people can do to continue the healing process. I can recommend food, herbs. I am a certified herbalist. Visualization practices, you know, all sorts of things to help people to continue the healing. So the healer, whatever their modality, can trigger a change, but it's up to the individual to continue the healing. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so that's that's how I practice healing. I think that answers the question. Just looking at my little keywords I wrote here so I don't forget anything. So for healing, I wrote one who assists others to find healing within. Yeah, and there is always an emotional component, emotional/mental or psychological and or spiritual component. Sometimes those are all sort of wrapped up into one, to physical healing. It's almost always not totally separate. I mean, if you just cut your finger on something, still you might have been emotionally distracted and you cut yourself, so that's a component. But there, yeah, it's usually a much more complicated thing, and so the individual must make some sort of effort to assist their own healing. The healer facilitates that process, gives advice. You know, a doctor might write a prescription, a healer might say take some herbs or do this meditation or do 2 more sessions, and you know, whatever. But yeah, as a healer, I'm a facilitator. Yeah. Okay. So, you know, people also ask me, you know, like, what's my religion? And as I've mentioned, I don't feel a need to be part of any one specific religion. I went to Catholic school from kindergarten through 8th grade. But saying I was raised Catholic doesn't quite convey it. So I grew up in a home where, and I've mentioned this before, the kind of mysterious side of life was the norm. I grew up in a haunted house, and I'm going to make a separate video on that. You know, my mom she could take pain away from my dad by holding his hand. She wasn't a healer, but she definitely had some spiritual abilities, healing abilities. She could see ghosts, all sorts of stuff happened in the house. It was not something to like run and, run screaming from. It was just like, oh, this is like a normal thing. And so I went to Catholic school, but that didn't mean that the sort of mystical, even metaphysical stuff that was just part of our lives, that they were like separate things. It's like they could be integrated. So I didn't grow up in a way where, some people, they grew up Christian and they have to keep their tarot cards secret from their family because they're just completely incompatible. For me, it was like totally normal, totally compatible, no problem. The mystical wasn't shunned. And the religion, the Catholicism, wasn't a huge part of at home. So my mom was technically Catholic, but she didn't go to church. And my dad was Presbyterian, but he didn't go to church. So it's like religious, but not ultra religious. It was just kind of all part of the whole, I guess, spiritual upbringing. So I don't have that dichotomy between, Catholicism and esoteric things. To me, it's like they can go together. Why not? So that was my upbringing. And after 8th grade, when I was pretty young, especially by the time I hit 7th grade, 7th or 8th grade, it was very apparent to me that a lot of people who went to church every day, all the time, were not living spiritual life. So they were not taking the teachings, the important teachings, not the political teachings, not the cultural, locational teachings that no longer apply to the 20th century. They weren't taking the be kind to others, love your neighbor as you love yourself, turn the other cheeks, the teachings of Jesus. They weren't really applying those to their everyday life. And so I was very clearly apparent or aware of that being religious did not necessarily mean you were spiritual. Some people were, but a lot of people weren't. So after 8th grade, when I went off to high school, I didn't really feel a need to go to church. Occasionally I did, but I should backtrack. Even though from a very young age, I identified as being spiritual, not necessarily Catholic. However, all the kids in my class and probably most of the kids in the school would have called me the most spiritual kid. I always prayed like this, not like this, like everyone else. Like I kind of had, I guess you could have called me a very pious kid, basically. I was the super spiritual one. So anyway, off to high school, I occasionally went to church, but I never felt like I had to be that religion. You didn't have to be a religion, a part of a religious group to be spiritual. And I'm very much, very hermit, mystic-like. So I'm really good at kind of doing my own thing, being nonconformist, and finding my own path. So, as an individual, as a person, like my personality is like, I don't have to have that group. So from there on, I was just open to learning about other religions, learning about different paths. And of course, as some of you know, when I went off to college, my first degree was in classics. So I studied a lot of ancient Greek, ancient Roman, Egyptian mythology, and of course that's their religion. So studying that, I did some religious studies through college. So I was always open to learning about different religions, different religious beliefs, different spiritual practices. I did actually get very involved in a Buddhist Sangha. There's a monastery when I lived in Washington State Sakya monastery. And for a few years, I would go there regularly for their meditations. And at that time, that's really what I needed. And I would say, studied Buddhism quite a bit, practiced Buddhism quite a bit. So practiced their meditation practices. I would go to insight meditations at another place. So I was really learning and practicing Eastern meditations and spiritual practices. And at that same time, I was doing intensive yoga practice. Most people think of yoga as a physical practice, the asana practice, but that's a very small piece of yoga. But I did there were a few years where I did a lot of asana practice as part of my spiritual practice. Because the body is a tool. I was working the vessel that my soul resides in. And you can say the temple that your soul is in, to get deeper, connect deeper to my own soul and the divine within. And that really expanded my connection to God. And it might be because of my upbringing. I don't have, like, a lot of people have trouble using the term God. And I often say God, spirit, the universe to kind of cover people from different beliefs and different paths. But I have no problem using the term God. God isn't, to me, a man on a cloud with a big white beard who looks like Zeus or Jupiter. God encompasses the universe. God is the spirit, the source that we all come from. Okay. Of course, there's also, if I do identify myself, at least the healer perspective, I do identify myself as a shaman woman. I have not done like several weekend retreat, become a shaman type thing. I feel I was born with that teaching, or with that, with shamanic experience. That's the best way I can say it. And in my video about astral projection, astral traveling, I mentioned it, talked about it a little bit, where I think from birth, I practice journeying, astral travel, you can say astral projection. It really is journeying. I would journey to other realms. I spent a huge, it's almost embarrassing to think, a huge portion of my childhood in journeying by myself. I spent a lot of time alone. And that's just the hermit mystic in me. And I would journey. Part of it was to manage all the emotional turmoil that I could pick up as an empath in the home, in the people and in the spirits there. But I knew how to do it. No one had to teach me. I knew how to journey. So shamanic journeying, it's like walking. It's second nature to me, and it's hard to explain or tell people how to do it, or where to go to learn to do that. I mean, I can guide people how to do it, guided meditations, but it's so second nature to me that it's a little hard to explain. It's like, how do you explain to someone what walking is? You could say, well, you put one foot down and the next one down. How do you explain that to a fish, basically? So that's kind of how it is to me. But I've learned how to guide people, how to advise people, practically. Okay, here's how you do it, da da da. But I don't know what it's like not to be able to do it. So I do identify as a shaman woman. And all of that, because it's autumn, it's October tomorrow, and it's it's the witchy season, right? You could say I'm like a hedge witch, which is like a shaman witch, because I journey. I know it's normal for me. And I do herbal healing. Like there's lots of stuff I do that you could give me all sorts of labels. You can call me a hedge witch, you can call me a shaman, you could say I'm a dropout Catholic, you could call me a Buddhist, you could call me a Yogini, you can call me this, you can call me that. I just say it's me, it's what I do. I don't typically put a label on myself like that. They're just all these bits and pieces that make up who I am and what I do. So I hope that's making sense. Let me just look at what I wrote here. Oh, I will also point out, like my ancestry, both my spiritual ancestry. So I said we have two ancestries. We have our soul's ancestry, which has experiences from other lifetimes. And I like to say other lifetimes because it's not all linear beyond the physical. So it could be past lives, but it could be future lives as well, parallel lives. So there's a spiritual ancestry, and then we have our physical ancestry, our genes, our genealogy. I am mostly Celtic, and both my maternal lines are, one's Irish and one's Scottish. I know from DNA tests that it is predominantly Celtic. It's not, mostly Scandinavian and this and that. And I have always identified with Celtic energy, ancestry. And I do feel spiritually, my spiritual ancestry, from what I've looked into, if we say looking into past lives specifically, that I have been, and I think also ancestors, and sometimes those cross. So an ancestor and an ancestral life, from 200 years ago could also have been your soul's experience, right? There can be crossover. That I have been like a Celtic witch or a Celtic shaman woman. That line definitely feels like very feminine lifetimes. Though, of course, we can be born male, female in all different lives. Okay, I think this is a long enough ramble. So to answer the question, what am I? I'm a spiritual life coach, or you could say spiritual counselor, a healer who draws on many different spiritual, religious backgrounds, teachings, many healing practices, with a lot of shamanic and Celtic energy thrown in there. Yeah, okay. I hope this made sense. It totally felt like a ramble here. I have like keynotes written on both sides of the screen here. But I think that covers it. I hope that answers your question, especially to Lucy, because you always ask great questions, and I think I have a few more to get to from you. Feel free to ask more questions below or to clarify anything. If you're struggling with bringing together a religious path that you choose to stick to and, let's say, a more esoteric path, and you want to combine them, because I don't feel like they have to be mutually exclusive, although I do understand that a lot of people experience that. And I will point out that my in-laws, I've experienced that with them. They're very strictly Catholic, what I consider sort of medieval Catholicism. And what I do, I can't talk about any of it with them. So we don't talk a whole lot. So I do understand it. I have a little bit of that experience in my life, but we manage it. Okay, so hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for stopping by and watching, liking, sharing, and subscribing, and I'll see you back here soon.